My name is Sophia Reeves. I was 31 years old the night my parents chose a champagne toast for my brother over the biggest moment of my career. I remember standing at a round banquet table in a ballroom that smelled like gardenias and floor wax, staring at my phone with a crystal award in my other hand, trying to figure out how a person can feel completely alone in a room full of 200 people who are all clapping for her. The award was heavy, cold. It said top 35, under 35 public interest attorneys in the state of Illinois, and my name was engraved on it, and none of the people who raised me were there to see it. I had saved their number under mom and dad in my phone since I was 12. I pressed call out of pure muscle memory. My mother picked up on the third ring. The background noise hit me before her voice did. Music, chatter, the sharp pop of a champagne cork. Sophia, honey, how did it go? How did it go? Like it was a dentist appointment. I just received the award, Mom. I'm standing here right now. Where are you? A pause. Then the shuffle of footsteps, like she was moving somewhere quieter, somewhere she could deliver the news without the party bleeding through the line. We're at the Hargrove in downtown. Your brother just signed the franchise agreement with the Midwestern Hotel Group. 5 new properties, Sophia. Do you know what that means for this family? I did know. I had watched my parents pour 30 years into those hotels. I knew what every expansion meant. I also knew that my brother had been trying to close that deal for 8 months, and that the signing date had been announced 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. Plenty of time to say, Sophia, we might miss your gala. Plenty of time to make a choice they could have at least warned me about. I sent you the invitation in January, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. You RSVP'd, yes. We did, and we feel terrible, but Marcus needed us there for the photos. The press was there, Sophia. This is a big moment for him. My father's voice cut in from behind her, loud and unbothered the way it always was when he was certain he was right. You know we're proud of you, sweetheart. Put the award on the shelf and come down here. We'll take pictures with it tomorrow. Put the award on the shelf. I looked across the ballroom at the other honorees surrounded by their people. Husbands, parents, siblings, with their phones out taking videos. One woman's mother was openly crying, pressing her daughter's face between both palms, saying something that looked like, I knew it. I always knew it. I watched that for 3 full seconds before I looked away. I won't be coming tonight, I said. Sophia, don't be like that. I'm not being like anything, Dad. I'm just telling you I won't be there. I ended the call before either of them could say something that would make me cry in a ballroom full of colleagues. Here is what I didn't say on that phone call, what I had never said out loud to anyone except my therapist and my best friend Yara. This wasn't the first time. This was just the loudest. My brother had been the marquee name in our family since the moment he started shadowing my father through the hotel corridors at age 14, carrying a clipboard and asking guests if the room was satisfactory. My parents saw themselves in him. They saw their legacy. They saw someone who wanted to build the same thing they had built. I wanted something different. I went to law school. I clerked for a federal judge. I took a job at a nonprofit doing wage theft cases for workers who couldn't afford attorneys, and my parents received that news with the same energy they gave my middle school science projects. Nice, but not quite the point. When I passed the Illinois bar, my father said, Good. Maybe now you can help us with the hotel contracts. When I won my first major case, a settlement for 43 restaurant workers who hadn't been paid overtime for 3 years, my mother texted, Saw something about your case online. Did your brother call you? He needs help with a lease agreement. I had spent years telling myself it would change, that they would eventually see what I was building and realize it mattered. Standing in that ballroom with gardenias and polite applause and nobody who shared my last name, I finally understood that this was just the architecture of our family. My brother was the load-bearing wall. I was decorative. The award dinner ended. I said goodbye to people I respected. One of the senior partners at the firm I'd turned down twice in order to keep doing public interest work shook my hand and said, You're the best thing that's happened to civil rights law in this state in a decade. I hope you know that. I thanked him and meant it. I also thought, quietly, that it was strange how clearly a stranger could see something your own parents had never once said. Before I tell you what happened next, and how a routine case at my job became the thing that finally made my family see me not as the daughter who chose the wrong path, but as the one they should have been watching all along. I want to ask you something. What time is it where you are? What are you doing right now while you listen to this? Because wherever you are, I want you to know this story traveled far from the family that tried to keep it small. If you have ever been the quiet achiever in a loud family, you already know how it works. You learn early that the spotlight is someone else's. You learn to work in the margins. You learn to stop expecting people to show up and start being grateful when they occasionally do. You carry your accomplishments the way you carry a library book carefully, without making a scene, returning it to the shelf when asked. I had been doing that for 31 years. That night at the awards gala was the last night I did it. I did not make a dramatic announcement. I did not write a letter. I did not call a family meeting or give my parents a chance to talk me out of what I had already decided. I went home, poured a glass of wine, sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet because that is where I think best. Don't ask me why, and I made one quiet decision. I was done performing for an audience that had never bought a ticket. Within 3 months, I had transferred internally to our organization's office in Cincinnati. I did not tell my family I was moving. I did not give them my new address. I did not explain my reasons or ask for their blessing, or wait to see if things would change if I just gave it a little more time. I emailed them a brief note that said I had accepted a position in another city and wished them well with the franchise expansion. My mother called 4 times that week. I let it go to voicemail each time. Her messages ranged from confused to wounded to a version of guilt trip that was so familiar it almost felt like a homecoming. My father left one message. He said, "This is very dramatic, Sophia." I saved it. I'm not sure why. My brother did not call at all. Cincinnati was gray in March, and I loved it immediately. I loved that no one knew me as Marcus Reeves's younger sister. I loved that when I walked into the office on my first day, my supervisor shook my hand and said, "I've read everything you've published. I have questions." Not, "Your brother expanded to 5 new properties. Isn't that exciting?" Just questions about my work. Just me. I dove into the caseload. Wage theft, unsafe working conditions, retaliation against workers who filed complaints, the kind of work that feels like it matters even on the days when it grinds you down. Cincinnati had a dense hospitality industry and a serious problem with employers who knew their workers were undocumented or too scared to speak up and used that fear like a management strategy. 6 months in, I was assigned to a cluster of cases that had been referred to us by a workers' rights hotline. The details were ugly and familiar. Housekeeping staff at a regional hotel chain being paid below minimum wage, overtime hours recorded as regular, tips pooled and redistributed to managers. Workers told that if they complained, their immigration status would be shared with employers. 3 of them had already been fired for raising concerns. All 3 had children. I pulled up the employer's name to begin the intake file. Hargrove Hotels. Regional chain, Illinois origin, currently expanding through a Midwestern franchise agreement. I sat very still for a moment. The logo was exactly as I remembered it. The gold H in a serif font. The tagline my father had come up with in 1997 and never changed. Where every guest feels at home. I closed the file. Opened it again. Closed it. Then I walked down the hall to my supervisor's office and knocked on the doorframe. She looked up from her screen. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Here is what I will say about my supervisor. A woman who had spent 20 years doing this work before I arrived. She did not flinch. She listened to everything I said, asked 3 precise questions, then folded her hands on her desk and looked at me with the kind of calm that comes from having seen everything. "You're recused from this case as of right now," she said. "No client contact, no strategy discussions, no involvement in any filings." "I understand. Do you want to tell them? The family?" I thought about the 3 workers who had been fired. I thought about the woman in the intake notes, who said she had been working 60-hour weeks and receiving payment for 40 because her manager told her the extra hours were training. I thought about my brother's photo in front of the franchise agreement, grinning, champagne glass raised, my parents on either side of him like 2 proud bookends. "No," I said. "Let the process work." She nodded once. "Then go do your other cases. We'll handle this one." I went back to my desk and sat there for a long time. Outside the window, the Ohio River was flat and brown and moving without stopping. I thought about all the times I had stood in the hotel kitchens as a child, watching the housekeeping staff fold towels into swans, thinking they were magic. I thought about the names I had read in the intake file, and how none of them would ever be folding towels into swans for guests who tipped them into a manager's pocket. That night, I allowed myself 1 glass of whiskey and 1 hour of sitting with the complexity of what was happening. Then I made dinner from scratch pasta, the kind that takes longer than the boxed version, the kind you make when you need to feel like you are building something with your hands. I ate it at my kitchen table, with a book propped open and the news on low in the background, and for the first time in years, I did not feel like I was waiting for someone to acknowledge that I had done something right. I was just living, quietly, squarely, inside my own life. The investigation moved with a swiftness that I knew, from years of this work, was only possible when the documentation was airtight. Our team had done their job well. The Department of Labor was already involved. When the State Attorney General's office requested a meeting with us to align timelines, I sat in the hallway outside the conference room and read a brief I was working on for a different case, because I was not in that room and it was not my place to be. What I knew from water cooler conversations and what was already becoming public, the Hargrove hotels had been cited before. A complaint from 4 years ago had been settled quietly. Another from 2 years ago had been dismissed on a technicality. This time, there were 14 workers with documented evidence, 3 of them with recorded conversations, and a paper trail that went up to the regional management level. My brother was regional management. I found out my parents knew something was coming when my mother called a number she must have gotten from my father's old contacts, a former colleague of mine who passed the message along. The message was, "Your family is trying to reach you. It seems urgent." I called back from a park bench on my lunch break, watching a dog chase a squirrel with absolute conviction that this time would be different. My mother answered before the first ring finished. "Sophia." Her voice was different. Smaller. "Do you know what's happening?" "I know," I said. A long silence. Then, "Are you involved?" I was recused the moment I recognized the name. "I have had no role in this investigation." "But you knew. You knew and you didn't call us." I watched the dog give up on the squirrel and go sit by its owner instead, apparently deciding that presence was better than the impossible chase. "Mom, there are 14 people who worked for this company who weren't paid what they were owed. Some of them have been waiting for this for years. Those workers could have talked to us directly. We didn't know. There are records showing your management team was notified twice. Once in writing. The silence this time was different. Heavier. "This is going to destroy everything your father built," she finally said. "What's going to affect what your father built?" I said carefully. "Is what happened inside those hotels, not the investigation." My brother got on the call then. I could hear the shift in the air, the way the energy changed when he entered a room even through a phone line. He didn't bother with a greeting. "You could have warned us," he said. "You had months. I was not involved in this case. You work at the organization that's tearing us apart. Don't split hairs with me, Marcus." I kept my voice level. "There are workers who were underpaid, threatened, and fired for complaining. You want me to have made that go away? I want you to have picked up the phone like a sister." The word landed the way he meant it to. I let it sit there for a moment. "The last time I picked up the phone," I said, "I was standing in a ballroom holding an award, and you couldn't be bothered to send a text." He had nothing for that. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have put the phone down. "That's what this is about?" he finally said. "You're doing this over a party?" "I'm not doing anything," I said, "except talking to you right now," which I almost didn't do. "I have to get back to work." I hung up. The park was very quiet after that. A woman jogged past with headphones in. The dog and its owner were gone. I sat with my hands in my lap and thought about whether I felt good or bad about that conversation, and the answer was neither. I felt clean. Like I had said only true things in a situation where every previous version of myself would have scrambled for a way to make everyone more comfortable. The story broke in the regional press first, then picked up nationally because of the franchise angle. Regional hotel chain faces labor investigation amid expansion deal. Then, Hargrove Hotels workers speak out. Then, when 3 of the affected workers gave on-record interviews to a Chicago outlet, we were told our immigration status would be used against us inside the Hargrove Hotels labor scandal. My brother issued a statement that used the phrase, "We take these allegations seriously," and isolated incidents in the same paragraph. The Department of Labor's spokesperson, when asked to respond, said the documentation suggested a pattern rather than isolated incidents, and left it at that. The Midwestern Hotel Group suspended the franchise agreement pending review. My brother lost 2 restaurant partnerships he'd been building through the hotel food program. An industry association he'd been angling to join quietly stopped returning his calls. My parents called twice more. I let both go to voicemail. My mother's message said they were retaining a law firm and expected this to be resolved quickly. My father's message said he didn't understand how his own daughter could watch this happen to people who had given her everything. I played that one twice. Then I went out for dinner by myself, to a restaurant I'd been meaning to try for months, the kind of place with dim lighting and a menu that changes seasonally, and a bartender who recommends the Amaro without being asked. I ordered the duck. I ordered the Amaro. I sat at a table near the window and watched the Cincinnati street life move past in the early evening, and I let myself feel something I had not permitted myself in a long time. Proud. Not in a gloating way. Not in a, "Ha, I told you so" way. Just quietly, privately proud that when the moment came, I had done the thing I had trained for and believed in, even when it was the harder thing, even when the faces attached to the wrongdoing were faces I had known since birth. The settlement took 11 months. I was not part of the negotiating team, but the outcome was a matter of public record. 14 workers received back pay, damages, and a formal apology from the company. The Department of Labor levied fines against Hargrove Hotels for the pattern of violations. The regional manager, my brother, agreed to step down from day-to-day operations as part of the settlement terms. The legal fees gutted the expansion plan. 2 of the 3 hotel properties my parents had purchased in anticipation of the franchise went back to lenders. The flagship in downtown Chicago stayed open, but the Hargrove name no longer appeared above the door. They rebranded quietly, the way businesses do when they need the name more than the name needs them. I received a letter from the Workers' Rights Legal Fund connected to the investigation, informing me that because my early identification of the conflict and proper disclosure had contributed to the speed and success of the resolution, I was eligible for a recognition grant. The amount was not dramatic by some standards. By mine, it was life-changing. I did not buy a car. I did not move to a bigger apartment. I set aside enough to pay off the last of my law school debt. I sat with that for a full minute, just feeling the weight of it lift, and then I put the rest into something I had been sketching out on legal pads for 2 years, a worker education fund. Free legal literacy workshops for hotel and restaurant employees in Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Know your rights, know what documentation to keep, know who to call and how to do it in a way that protects you. We partnered with 2 community colleges, a labor union, and eventually the very hotline that had received the original Hargrove complaints. At our first workshop, in a community center on the east side of Cincinnati, 43 people sat in folding chairs and listened to me explain wage theft law in plain English. A woman in the 3rd row raised her hand and asked what to do if your manager says you'll be reported to immigration if you complain. I told her exactly what to do, step by step, in 2 languages. After the session, she came up to me with her coat already on, like she wasn't planning to stay, and said, "My daughter is in school for nursing. I always told her to find a job where nobody can tell her she doesn't belong. I think you found that job." I thought about that for the rest of the day. My mother sent a card in the mail about 8 months after the settlement. Actual paper, my name written in her handwriting on the envelope, the return address the downtown Chicago hotel. Inside, she wrote that she was sorry for how things had gone, that she had not fully understood the seriousness of the situation before it was too late, that she hoped I was well, that she missed me. She did not say, "I should have come to your gala." She did not say, "I see now what your work means." She did not say, "Your brother and your father were wrong to make you feel like second place for 30 years. She said she missed me, and that she hoped I was well, and that she was sorry for how things had gone, as if the things were weather, as if they had simply happened to all of us equally. I read the card 4 times. Then I put it on my desk and wrote her back. I told her I appreciated that she reached out. I told her I was well, and that my work was going in a direction I felt genuinely good about. I told her I was open to a real conversation, one where we could be honest about the patterns in our family and what they had cost, not just in the past year but in the years before that too. I told her I was not interested in picking up where we left off as if nothing had happened, not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because the version of myself that accepted that arrangement no longer existed. I signed it. With love. Sophia. I did not hear back right away. And here is the thing about that. The thing I would have found unbearable at 21, or even at 28. The quiet didn't hurt. It just was. Some silences are punishment. Some are just the space between one version of things and whatever comes next. I had learned, slowly, and at some cost, to tell the difference. Here is what I want to tell you, if you're listening to this and recognizing some version of your own life in mine. It is possible to love your family and still refuse to be smaller than you are for their comfort. It is possible to grieve the family you needed while building something real with the life you actually have. It is possible to do the right thing even when it costs you something, even when the people who lose something because of your honesty are people whose approval you spent years chasing. I did not expose my family's business out of spite. I did not plan any of it. What I did was train for years to do a specific kind of work, and then I did that work, and then I refused to make exceptions for people who shared my last name, when those exceptions would have come at the cost of people who had no one else in their corner. That's not revenge. That's just who I had spent a decade becoming. The version of me who stood in that ballroom alone with a crystal award and a phone and 200 strangers clapping. She deserved better from her family. She was right to stop waiting for it. The version of me sitting in a Cincinnati coffee shop right now, answering emails from workers who found our workshop through word of mouth, who found us because someone told someone who told someone else. She is not waiting for anyone. So, if you're the one in your family who does the work and gets the polite, distracted response, if you're the one who sends the invitation and watches the RSVP turn into a no-show, if you're the one who has been told, in 100 small ways, that your ambitions are acceptable as a hobby, but not quite the point, I want you to hear this. Your work is the point. Your choices matter to people who are not related to you and who cannot wait for you to stop asking permission to show up fully. The people who benefit most from you staying quiet will always be the first ones to call you dramatic when you don't. Stop asking them. Put down the phone. Stop checking the group chat. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what your role is. Go do your work. Go to your own ceremony and stand in the front row of your own life. And if nobody who shares your blood is there to see it, find the people who are because they are there. And they are clapping. And some of them are counting on you in ways that have nothing to do with DNA. That's enough reason to keep going. More than enough. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in my position and discovered that your own family was the center of a case you'd been building your career around, would you have walked away from it? Or would you have done your job? And have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting someone who needed you more? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.